souls who wish to share their truth and wisdom in this great time of conscious awakening.
Hosted by Chris and Stephen of the Purple Mountain Spiritual, Health and Wellbeing Centre. Hello friends, and welcome to the Collective Awakening podcast. I'm Chris along with Stephen of the Purple Mountain Spiritual, Health and Wellbeing Centre, and we're very honoured to have our guest once again, Sami Richard. We're welcoming back, and I'm
nice to be back, guys.
It's great to have you back with us. And I was just talking shortly before we started recording of the last time we spoke to Sami was this, where we felt energetically we were in a breathing period of what's been going on the last few years, where we could take a breath and catch up with ourselves. And so quickly we find ourselves going into another process and all sorts going on, and we're going to cover that as much as we can in this chat. So welcome back, Sami. And I just wanted to open up just what you've been sort of feeling around you since our last chat, and anything you feel relevant that you've been experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're now in this phase where it's never externally, at least, going to feel completely stable in the external field. I think we've entered that chaotic reorganization process, and every individual is going to be feeling that differently, depending on where they're at in their personal process. So very just much depends on our learning requirements at this time and our ability to use the experiences and skills that we've ascertained in order to navigate these times with an awareness of what's going on, but without feeding the chaos in our own bodies by fueling the emotional tumultuous energies, I suppose. So that's what I've been trying to watch for in myself, is just being aware of my own internal processes and making sure that I'm not giving too much attention to these collective timelines and the fear propaganda, which is playing the same old tricks, let's be honest, to try and get us all plugged in, because it's running out of ideas and it's desperate ultimately. So it's a good thing what's happening when you look at the bigger picture, because the COVID narrative's dying down, maybe not because they wanted it to, but because they had to. I think the cat's out the bag with that one. The people are fed up, and I think they've run out of ideas. So they've had to strip back with the restrictions, perhaps earlier than they hoped, or perhaps they never intended to. You know, with all of the passports and everything they had in the works, they don't seem to really be fulfilling that aspect of the agenda very well at the moment. And maybe there's something in the works coming up, or it's this deceiving, calm before the storm. But certainly I think it is a response of the collective consciousness as well. So that's the positive aspect I think that we're witnessing going on.
Yeah, it's a little bit, the feeling is, like you say, that narrative had played out so much, and the cat was out the bag, so we're not going to be able to go back to that. It's like there's only so many times they can go back to that well, and then it very quickly started to play out in another way. I feel in the form that's been used many, many times over our history, is in the way of the fear of war, or the fear of conflict was very quickly brought in.
Yeah, I mean, they've been stirring up tensions with Russia for a long while. Anyone who was looking into this political stuff a decade ago or beyond will know that Russia is the scapegoat to try and incite war. Whether they're participating in the charade or not, that's another conversation. And it is, I suppose, important in a way to try and discern what the truth is around it. But we don't want to get too swept up down these rabbit holes of who's doing what, because like you said, it is just the same tactics to incite feelings of fear around war that we've experienced so many times. So we need to change our perspective now and shift our consciousness rather than falling for the same divide and conquer tactics by picking sides and polarizing in these made up conflicts. Whether or not both sides are in on it, one of them is being used as a guinea pig or not, is actually irrelevant, because ultimately it's about the way we respond to it that's going to determine how far they're able to take it. So for me personally, that the Russia-Ukraine conflict didn't faze me in any way. I kind of just observing it on the media, and it's not having an emotional response for me at all. And I feel like it's not, also, I don't feel like that's quite gone to plan for them as well. It may be just me feeling that way because I'm quite detached from it. But my inclination witnessing the collective is that there isn't as much fear around this prospect of a World War III as they would have liked to stir up, because there has been this underlying tension that there could be another world war coming, because I think that was their ultimate plan, to have 3 major wars. But as I've always said, I think the Third World War was already in action since, I suppose, the Second World War, but actually it's just been going on for ages. It's the war on consciousness, and this is what we've got to remember now.
Yeah. I just want to add there as well, Sami, a very good, important point, and anybody who's listening, a huge inspiration is try to observe. I think that's a big thing at the moment, is not reacting to what's happening around us and listening and observing. And a lot of people have said to us, well, that is a bit of a weakness. We have to, again, there's that illusion, isn't it, that we have to fight to protect peace, protect the light against the dark. And actually, there are ways where we can observe, we can send out by not reacting, by not fighting. You know, a lot of people think, you know, we have to have soldiers, you have to have war. And actually, that's an illusion in itself as well, isn't it?
Yeah, that's outdated now, that mentality that we have to fight for freedom through resistance and defend our right for freedom. There is a place for that if we're being threatened directly, of course. The self-defense, and under natural law, the right to self-defense is sacrament, you know. But I think that approach isn't going to work anymore, because resistance just creates more conflict, and we just keep looping in these same cycles.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter, like I said, which side you're on. It's all feeding into the polarized divide and conquer strategy, where there's always a winner and a loser. So you might believe you're on the righteous side of history, but we have to look at it more energetically now, and not based on the illusion that we're witnessing on surface appearances. And there is this resistance mounting, and understandably people are frustrated and angry discovering the truth at this time, especially since COVID, because there's so many ramifications of what's happened since in the last few years. So there's a place for an expression of righteous anger on the pathway to conserving emotional energy. And we shouldn't deny anyone that experience, of course. And we've all gone through that in our own way. And we still do get triggered every now and then. And I do as well. But I try and catch that in its tracks now before I project that energy. And because I understand it's much better for myself to be able to conserve my energy and redirect it in creative ways to try and build new structures and energy fields through that art of co-creation and conscious manifestation, rather than spilling my own energy into the field and allowing it to be siphoned. And that's ultimately what's happening en masse at the moment, and it has been since the dawn of this cycle. That's the feeding program that we're all caught up in. So we have to be cognizant of that and make sure that we're not feeding it ultimately.
Do you think as well, just want to touch upon a point that you made there, there does seem to be, particularly the past 20, 30 years, particularly when we just look at the movie industry, I mean, we were talking about technology before, how there is such an emphasis between And really, if you look at any movie, they talk about light and dark and the battle between the good wins over evil. And there are some very famous Japanese directors that directed the Ghibli films, that like Spirited Away, that are very spiritual. And he doesn't like any sort of like the American movies because they emphasize that the baddies, the evil people, the bad people always have to be killed. They have to be slaughtered. They have to be eradicated. And actually, there has to be a unity between the good and not the people that do bad things. We need to work together. And actually, there's the shadow light within all of us that we can't, with this constant battle, this constant war that we're having really within ourselves, it's not getting us anywhere, is it? So, and movies play, I call it propaganda. It is that conditioning that the light will save us, and actually it's not going to work, is it?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, the predictive programming through the typical archetypal light and dark story always plays out the same, with the good fighting the evil and conquering it in the end, and then happily ever after. The hero's journey. And I do like aspects of that, even in the Western Hollywood movies, the classics like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. I actually like the symbology of the archetypal hero's journey stories. And a lot of that's based on Jungian psychology, actually, based on the archetypes. And a guy called Joseph Campbell, who, I don't know if you've heard of Joseph Campbell, he studied mythology across the world and drew patterns between all these ancient cultures and modern cultures. But he used a lot of Carl Jung's archetypal symbols to create, to explain the mythological relevance of what's happening from a higher perspective. And a lot of movies actually cite Joseph Campbell as an inspiration for the stories, which is then based on Jung. And a lot of them also will have studied Jungian psychology. So there's that aspect of the light and dark, which I think is relevant. But what you said about the whole method in which we take down the darkness, I think there's something to be said for that I agree with, that we don't need to be in this crazy apocalyptic game of fighting and conquering. I just think there was a place for that. And of course, we've inherited the collective memory, ancestral memory of all these past wars, where we still feel that trauma being triggered whenever we hear the word war, so it's not just trauma from this life that we're all feeling. We all share these memories that we're only recovering now. So I think they play upon that to try and trigger the same cycle again. They constantly repeat the same process to keep us enslaved, war after war. It just takes slightly different expressions, but ultimately the energy and mindset behind it doesn't really change. But this time, at the end of this cycle, and as we enter this new era, we have to step out of that paradigm entirely now and recognize, like you said, that the darkness does exist within all of us and has to be integrated within ourselves by recognizing and accepting it. And then when we witness it in the world, we're able to understand and accept it without the need to constantly be in this blame mindset, because evil is just the darkness. That evil is just an expression of darkness that's just been possessed, and we can't change it through, like, these psychopaths, for example. They're not going to listen to us because they're so fragmented, and they have their agenda and they need to follow it in order to survive. They can't. They're not just going to stop because we've exposed them. It might help, but the exposing is only part of the bigger picture here. What we're actually doing is transforming the vibrational landscape so that their agendas and frequencies no longer resonate with our own. So we're shifting into a different reality time stream where those systems of control and AI architecture will naturally just dissolve in the light of our consciousness, because we've integrated that dark aspect within ourselves. So when people say, oh, it's a bit of bypassing to only focus on the inner stuff and not to fight what's happening in the reflection, well, it's not, because there's a link between the inner and the outer world. And as we transform internally, then the outer world moves and changes in accordance with that. So that's how the reflection changes. So it's definitely not bypassing to focus on in that direction first, rather than fighting the reflection.
Do you think, though, Sami, as well, that there has been this culture that's been created in particularly in the Western culture of playing the saviors, the rescuers, and sort of this feeling of interfering as an unnatural process, because we know that people and countries, we should progress in a natural, organic way, coming in and rescuing countries, changing things. What, if anything, Iraq and Afghanistan has proven that trying to imprint our ways doesn't work, and it's again that cycle of playing the rescuer, the savior, the hero's going to come in. It's not working, is it?
No, yeah, the hero savior complex is something we need to be cognizant of. It's a form of spiritual ego that's very subtle, but can be very destructive if we are consumed by it. So that's another phase in the awakening that we need to be aware of, that we don't get stuck in. And you don't really know you're in it when you're in it, because it feels justified, because you feel like you're fighting for a positive cause.
Yes.
So of course you're going to think you're well intended, but it's still coming from an unresolved place within ourselves, which indicates a lack of trust. Because if we truly trusted in ourselves and our path, and we knew that we were in alignment with it, then nothing else ultimately matters, because that's the only control we have. And then, like you said, things will organically shift. So that when we're trying to take on this obligation or responsibility to be the martyr, this whole sacrificial lamb, Jesus martyr complex that we have to all engage with to save the world, it's ourselves that need saving first.
Yes. Spot on. Yes.
Yeah.
I just want to, sorry, Chris, I want to ask Sami, I'm absolutely loving the conversation.
You're on a roll, Stephen, you go for it.
It's something that I've been really, really thinking about a lot. We know that, everything happens for a reason. Everything is part of the divine plan or the divine purpose. Do you feel, Sami, that what I call the light side or the conscious side, that we need the dark, if I'm able to use that term, the dark, the shadow, to wake up the light? Because I find that, people look at lockdowns from the past 2 years very negatively. And I've said to Chris, let's bring more lockdowns, because it's awoken more people than ever before. So in a way, I feel that has the light allowed the dark to creep out from the shadows, to wake us up, to wake people up?
Yeah, it's that's a very deep existential question I've pondered a lot. What is the origins of darkness and what purpose does it serve? My mindset is it just is what it is. At some point in the multidimensional field, some aspect of source decided to play the role of God, take on the role of being God, which obviously doesn't work out. And we've fallen down the dimensional layers as a result of that into a form of consciousness enslavement. And from a 3D perspective, I would say, yes, the darkness serves a purpose, because the only way out of it is to recognize it and integrate it, like we said before. If you were to ask, well, is darkness necessary? That's a bit more of a difficult question, because I don't think suffering is our natural state. And I do think some of the horrors that we're experiencing in the 3D realm, which are tantamount to hell vibrations, if you're I mean, even some of us have been to the pits of hell in our minds and in our bodies, even if we may not have experienced it as this fiery pit of hell, but that's just a symbolic representation. So hell and heaven both exist on the earth, and that's what the 3D is. It's almost like this purgatory in a way, where we're given the choice about which direction to align with. So we have to reclaim consciousness of the darkness to be able to make the self-aware choice to move in the direction of the true light or true source. So in that sense, yes, the darkness is playing a significant role, and it's inevitable and unavoidable that we're going to have to wade through the darkness. So more false flag events, as painful and destructive as they may appear on outside appearances, are unfortunately, I think, the only way that are going to shake humanity from its slumber. Otherwise, we'll cling on to any semblance of stability and illusion we can cling on to, which is, it's a stagnant, very restrictive way of living, and we'll forever be enslaved if we continue to operate on this bandwidth, this frequency. So yeah, I do believe the darkness is serving to wake us up. Whether or not it's meant to, I just see it as that is just what's happening, and we have to accept that.
You were just talking there, Sami, about, I mean, there's a lot of talk at the moment about what we call three-dimensional perspective. Now, there's a lot of talk about in the community about moving away from the three-dimensional perspective to the fourth, fifth, beyond. Can you sort of explain that process, and what would it be like in the fourth dimension, you know, as we progress, as we awaken?
Yeah, well, we're trying to embody 4D and 5D into the 3D. So we're not actually trying to transcend into a different dimension, so to speak. So what will happen is it will be more of a subtle energetic change in the physical landscape. Everything will feel more receptive and malleable to our consciousness, increased synchronicity, speeding up of time, increased connection between those that we resonate with, splitting of timelines. That's what it's all about ultimately. That is the shift into the 4D, and it's happening now. We just might not be aware of it so much because we're still stuck in that density in our own bodies. We're still being governed by our trauma and pain body, so it feels very heavy in 3D. But for those of us that have been able to lift some of that shadow gunk and clear it, we're starting to feel that 4D, 5D connection already, because it happens again within our bodies through the moving and circulation of energy through the chakra system. And I speak about this quite a lot, but the three base chakras in our bodies correlate to the three dimensions in the external field, external domain, and that's related to our personality and ego structure, which is governed by our unconscious traumas, right? So when we bring them to consciousness, and then we do the healing necessary, which we all know, we should know by now what to start doing. I mean, we can go into that later, but as we lift that darkness and clear it from within our bodies, that's how we move and graduate the energy up to the heart complex, the fourth chakra, which is equivalent to the fourth dimension. And that's where we should all be striving for, at least at the moment, and then we can go beyond that. But there's no bypassing our way to that. We have to respect the incremental process to be able to move the energy there. Otherwise we're skipping to that place from a place of avoidance of our own pain. So I've had glimpses of it, and you guys will have as well in your life, of that 4D experience. I mean, 5D would be less, it'd be even more amplified, that vibration and that acceleration of time, I suppose.
Is this, Sami,
it's kind of harder to explain 5D?
Yeah, we're sorry to interrupt there, but where
That's all right.
we might be experiencing like ascension symptoms within our bodies, feeling heavy-headed, or these physical feelings coming upon us when this is occurring.
Well, that depends on how much you've worked on your own embodiment process, as in how regulated your nervous system is. When your nervous system isn't able to cope with the influx of all of this plasma and light, just see it as light codes, whatever, you know, this is all semantics here. if we can't, let's call it electromagnetic energy is probably a better term to use. If we haven't cleared the channel to embody that heightened frequency, higher frequency, then it almost causes our nervous system to short circuit, because we can't anchor that frequency into the 3D. So that's why when we try and bypass to 5D or whatever, all this 5D ascension without the embodiment process, we start to experience more of these imbalances and symptoms, and then that can lead to hijacking by demonic entities and programs that exploit that imbalance, because we're not rooted into the 3D, and when we're not grounded. This is why we grounding is so important, like we said before this conversation. But I think other people who are doing it organically will also be experiencing some of these symptoms as well. I know this because I've been experiencing it in my life, for sure. I've had a difficult time sometimes trying to manage all of this energy, and sometimes it's hard to discern where it's coming from. Is it coming from the ascension, or is it coming from these bombardments on the outside? Because it's arguably quite hard to discern which one's which. So that can be a bit frustrating sometimes, because you start beating yourself up and thinking that you're falling off track, when actually it could just be a process of evolution. But I don't think evolution should be that difficult. So when it comes to ascension symptoms, I take that with a pinch of salt, really, because
that's fair
I think I personally think, as we move out of our trauma state and hit this plateau within our bodies, we feel more regulated, and we can just naturally access that divine intelligence without needing to go through all of this suffering to get there. So that's my interpretation.
Did you not find as well, though, Sami, when we talked about this before, haven't we, about shadow work and doing the trauma work, not just from this life, but our ancestral, that is within our DNA, that we're healing for our ancestors. And I find personally that the past 12 months the energy has been incredibly heavy, and you think, is it me, is it external? You're healing together, but the bliss feeling does eventually come. People that are listening, that feeling of euphoria, I feel, when you've done something really heavy and you still trying to process and integrate it, that feeling. I was just driving last week and I just started laughing in the car, feeling this sense of happiness, and then back in the heavy energy. So I feel, people probably driving past thinking, who's that lunatic laughing in the car? But that feeling does come, that happy feeling, that joy feeling. Like you said, we shouldn't have to feel sad and heavy, and we have to fight this energy. It should become easier as we observe it more, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I think we've become so accustomed to feeling shit that we almost feel like it's necessary to evolve whilst feeling shit. And that state you talk about, where you feel that euphoria, like that can express itself in two different ways, I would say. I would say one way I feel that is a sense of passion and real inspiration that I want to externalize and share to inspire others. That's a kind of discipline, action, external form of that energy that I feel needs to then be channeled into something. And then there's another type of state of being altogether, which I actually prefer. And it's not even euphoric. It's actually just this pure contentment in the body, this lightness that you feel, the airiness, where all the weight has just been lifted and there's no mental processes going on at all. You just feel so at peace with the moment. There's no fear programs or ego complexes running. You might go out for a walk and you'll just feel that visceral connection to the environment, to animals, to nature. That is the state that I'm striving to ascertain and integrate into my everyday life. And then from that place, I think the inspiration can then filter through, and you'll have those streaks of passion and energy surges, that because you're streaming higher consciousness and downloading it, and then you can then transmit that into the field to help other people. So that's then the fulfillment of our purpose. So there's a kind of masculine feminine component there of surrender and discipline that are in this state of flux. But the discomfort and the heaviness and the wiry feeling we feel in our nervous systems, we should be trying to relinquish that once and for all. And that's not to say that our shadow work's complete or that we've attained enlightenment. It just means we've reached this equilibrium where life just becomes easier because we're more in control now. We're not being governed from the outside.
Just Sami as well. Just want to, while we talk about the nervous system here, I just want to sort of, I don't know the answer to this personally, and it's something that's intrigued me. This does seem to be a lot of people now, more than ever, suffering from, you've heard the term fibromyalgia. Is that, do you think, a resistment of letting go as we transcend or change? What's your thoughts, if you've got an opinion on it?
Yeah, that's a tricky one again, because we don't know where it's coming from. It does have that component, but I think a lot of these symptoms like fibromyalgia are actually just caused by distortions in the EMF field. That there is resistance. So it's always both. There's always an external and internal component, because ultimately, if we were able to deal and manage with those energies externally, we wouldn't be feeling these symptoms. Yeah. And I'm not trying to shame anyone or blame someone who's feeling that way, because like I said, I've had all kinds of autoimmune responses. I've struggled with physical problems my whole life. This is part of the reason why I am as aware as I am, because I've had to work through the struggle. So I understand how difficult it is when you're experiencing these states of imbalance to manage them and gain control. And that can then create more resistance, and it just becomes this perpetuating trap that we're stuck in our bodies. But I think that regardless, the solution is the same, that we do have control over it by regulating the nervous system. So I would really say that's the elephant in the room we all need to pay attention to. It's all electrical energy. All of these symptoms and diseases that are emerging now at a higher rate than they were in the past are all to do with the way we're interfacing with the electromagnetic fields in the environment. It's amazing how much actually just starts from the nervous system and then manifests in particular organs and hormone deficiencies, mental afflictions, emotional problems. The undercurrent of it all is linked to the frequency that we're interfacing with.
So I want to ask one more question there, and I'll hand over back to Chris. Is when we talk about heavy energies, I don't know if you both have experienced this, that I find when there is a full moon or when there is particular full moons, I find it even heavier, the energy. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, actually, the last full moon we had at Easter, I think, was it on Easter Sunday? No, it was on the Friday before Easter.
The Friday,
yeah. I was out on a walk, and it was palpable, the moon energy. And I've picked up on this before for quite a number of years now, especially as I started exploring the potential dark side of the moon. So yeah, if I'm going to be honest, I will say there is an influence happening there. You know, people sometimes ask me, well, how do you know this? Like, how do you know what's going on with the moon? I can't explain the process to how I've reached that conclusion, but I'm quite confident that it's a frequency siphoner, the moon. Like, yeah, is it a satellite base? Is it a hollowed out planet? Like, who knows? Like, it's something of the sort, but it certainly feels like it's got this magnetism to it, especially when with regards to the lunar reversals and how that affects the feminine. The dark mother archetype is related to the moon because it influences the menstrual cycles of women. It influences the water, the emotional energy, which we all obviously contain. So we'll be feeling heightened emotional responses on nights of the full moon, because that frequency pull is stronger, and it's very hard to detach from that unless you're very conscious of it, and you can then create your own field of protection based on your own electromagnetic energy. But for people who are operating unconsciously, it can have a really negative impact, I think. So yeah, it's something to be aware of.
Yeah, I thought that was really well answered. A few of the wordings you've used there about how you explain what you're feeling, and like the magnetism with the moon. That's how I feel very much. So we might not be able to quite put that finger on it of what it is, but we can say how we're feeling and what's going on every time it comes about. But I wanted, seeing as Stevens took us to the skies, I'm going to stay there because something else that I've and a lot of people have been very conscious of. Now, I know this has been, many people have been aware of chemtrails for a long time, but it seems to be something that is becoming very relevant just lately, more and more, as we become into the spring and the summer months, that these cloudier skies are coming. And it's what I want to touch on with this really is the natural and the unnatural that is occurring on this planet right now, and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, well, with the geoengineering, I mean, that's unnatural as it comes, really. And they've ramped the gears up with the trails and the cloud seeding, artificial clouds, under the guise of creating rain in more, dry environments, which is just a complete excuse, obviously, for the obvious that they're trying to manipulate the weather and block the sun. So that's the artificial aspect of it, and that goes quite deep because that completely ties into the AI transhumanist network that they're erecting, which is interfacing with the vaccines in our bodies. And then the natural element has also been disrupted. So the weather itself is responding to the collective consciousness, which has been disrupted because we're functioning on the wrong frequency. So we are, I think, experiencing an increase in natural weather disturbances as well. So we're contending with all of that at once at the moment, because as we know, what we're witnessing outside is a reflection of what's going on in the collective psyche. So there's this turbulence which is being reflected in these tumultuous weather patterns. So it's a combination of both synthetic and natural, but the natural comes from a state of distortion.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts on energetic, those who use crystals, organite and such in like cloud busting and coming together and assisting in clearing some of those unnatural or energies? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's a place for that, for sure. Because it's very hard to counter what's going on in the skies. It's all immersive. It's something that we just look up and think, oh shit, like, all right, I am controlling my timeline, but I'm not going to just be able to clear the clouds. Like that takes an awful lot of energy to be able to achieve that. It's possible. Like, anything's possible, but there needs to be more energy in the field to achieve that. So I think coming together with others and holding the intention, using tools like crystals, is a good supplement to be able to achieve that, definitely, because we are in this together ultimately, and the more that we can connect to one another, the more we amplify our resonance, the more we can naturally counter these distortions.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like it's the same solution to a different problem of coming together collectively, and what we can actually not only achieve on our own, but when we come together, how powerful we can be and what we can create. And we can change so much of what's occurring around us in an instant.
Yeah, the divine power far supersedes this artificial infrastructure. It's just we haven't recognized it yet. We can shift into entire new realities if we had the belief and we shared that belief, we could literally transcend into higher dimensional planes of existence where the sun almost merges again with the earth. The earth ascends back to its 7D, 5D state, whatever, Gaia they call it, or Tara on the 5D level. And so the earth is literally responding to us as it cells, but within each of us is the macrocosm as well. We're the microcosm and the macrocosm. We just need to unlock that infinite potential, but we can't achieve that straight away. It's a very incremental process, like you said before about the DNA, activating dormant DNA, increasing those strands of DNA, and then moving up the dimensional spheres. And then as we do that, the earth also moves up on its own evolutionary journey, and then all these weather patterns start to stabilize. The sun becomes more stable because it's emitting more plasma, which is then being infused by our bodies, which, like we said, then elevates the nervous system, be able to hold more of that energy. So we start to almost merge with the sun, which is the light giver, but we wouldn't necessarily see the sun in the same way. It would be a bit more of a holographic experience. We witness everything is very compartmentalized, even the planets and the solar system and so on and so on. We see it as very separate. But as you move to the higher domains, it all starts to interface and become connected as one again, as it was supposed to before the fall of man into this fragmented state.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems again like it is with ourselves or collectively or things going on with the earth, there has to be a natural progression, not forced.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of this stuff sounds quite out there, and it is hard to put into words, but I'm just trying to open up pathways of consciousness for people to understand. You don't need to know all the terminology and language. Everyone has their own way of describing this process. But yeah, like you said, I want people to understand that we, as cliche as it sounds, the power to transform the collective condition or the external does lie within each of us as individuals, because again, as cliche as it sounds, we are all connected.
Yeah.
And I know the new age philosophies have taken this concept and distorted it so that we actually just deny our individuality, which isn't good. So we need to accept who we are as individuals. But as we do transcend to higher states of consciousness and we start to connect to others in the quantum field and we pull each other into one another's realities, we start to share our experience and we almost merge. It's kind of like the whole concept of twin flame, the hierogamic union between the masculine and feminine. That is like a merging of two souls that become one, but they're still individual souls. It's just that they've attained a sense of wholeness on their own and they're ready to now merge and expand and evolve together. We can see that same process happening between these soul tribes, but we can't connect to everyone straight away because people have still got their own lessons to learn. So we really just want to work on our own micro communities for now, come together, amplify that energy, and then the rest will start to snowball from there. And that field of influence will start to expand wider and wider. But when we jump too far out and think we can change the whole world, we just get pulled into these unfavorable timelines and get caught into other people's trauma, and they're not taking the responsibility necessarily to do the work they need to do by themselves. So it's kind of like we're cheating the process. So we have to start with ourselves as an anchor point and build outwards incrementally from there. And then we'll start to feel that true co-creation and merging happening, which will then reflect as our experience of external reality.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really, really powerful. It's interesting as you're talking there, just because we talk about these things that they may seem quite deep and everybody uses different wording and different ways of putting it, but it's actually very simple when it comes down to it. The components, very simple. And
yeah, it is. It's very simple. We're trying to add all these layers of complexity to quite a simple solution. We're actually trying to strip away that are false identities and the layers of ego. But so many of us are focusing externally, trying to acquire all of this knowledge, constantly stuck on the hamster wheel of accumulating more and more baggage. And that's actually just feeding the ego. What we're trying to do is release all of that and find more presence in ourselves. And it took me a while to realize that myself. I thought I was, like we said, caught in this battle, and that was all about getting as much knowledge as possible and fighting the system from within and infiltrating the current system and exposing the truth and fighting. But then you realize like that those efforts are largely futile. But like I said before, there's a place for that on the journey. We all have to go through that until we come back to ourselves and realize, hang on, I'm still operating based on these false personas, and I'm not actually connected to my higher mind, my authentic self at all.
I find as well, as an observational point of view, that I've learned over the years, that surrendering, because you can get so overwhelmed, and I've fallen trap into this. You look at things and you're thinking, oh my god, how am I going to cope, the energy. And actually spirit said to me, the divine said to me, just surrender to the process, just be you. Everything's happening as it should, just be you. And you might have to at times step in, and like you said, Sami, step in where you are needed. But just surrender, just be you, and that's just good enough. I think there is such a complicated process, that there is this manual that we all have to follow. And actually some of us have just come back to you there's just to be a beacon of light, just being us and helping raise the consciousness. Surrender is the key word here. But we don't want to surrender from a place of unconsciousness. So there's passiveness.
Or passiveness. This is the key, and this is again where all these spiritual fallacies have hijacked the truth, because they want us to surrender and let in these dark energies, because we're not in control of our mind. So the mind isn't the enemy here. It's the lower predator ego mind that's running these scripts and stories based on our conditioning and our soul's learning requirements. So it's still important until it's no longer relevant. That's what we need to discern from the higher mind. The higher mind is the mindful witness that's able to hold a state of emotional neutrality and can witness our own processes of the ego playing out internally and see that reflected in the world as well. When we're able to hold that state, we actually are in a place of surrender, because we've given up the ego mind in favor of the higher mind, and the higher mind's connected to our God source intelligence, which is actually guiding us. So it's not even the same as them. So there are two minds, and I've been exploring this quite a bit deeper recently with my inner work. That's kind of where I'm at with this at the moment. I'm starting to really try and separate or be aware of what's going on in my mind at whatever time, and being able to catch those negative thought loops in their tracks, and just tell myself, no, that's a program. I'm disidentifying from that now. And you can almost narrate that to yourself. And I feel in those states, I actually am in a state of surrender, because it just doesn't feel like my personality anymore, or an identity that I've attached to. It feels like it still has an identity, but it's this kind of authenticity. I'm not all for like abandoning our sense of individuality. We can still be in a state of surrender and connected to higher intelligence and still have a kind of personality. But it's just this more organic, authentic self, much more relaxed, content, calm. And it doesn't, like you said, some of us have just come here to be able to be that anchor and that beacon. And it's only the ego, the spiritual ego, that tells us that we need to fulfill this God-ordained special mission. Maybe some of us do have quite important missions to serve a lot of people, but that doesn't denote our value or our worth. It's down to each of us to discover what our role is during this time. But everyone, regardless of what you think your role is, has to find that place of inner peace, first before they can be of service. Otherwise, we are still being governed inadvertently by some form of ego. It might be a lower ego or a slightly higher version of spiritual ego, but it's still ultimately the same.
Starts with self, isn't it? Self. When we talk about love, it starts with, you know, you want to learn about love thyself. And I think the core of everything, and you find that people that I've met in my journey that might, you know, radiate that pure unconditional love. I think we don't use that word enough. I don't feel, maybe, perhaps, or maybe people don't understand the word unconditional love. And you feel that maybe with people that have lived on the earth plane, maybe people like Gandhi and other very spiritually attained people that have radiated that love. And maybe that's what we all should be attaining for. I don't know. I'm just sort of putting out there.
Yeah, no. That's a good point. Love is the thread that binds us all together ultimately. And on the journey of ascension, we can easily get swept away by desire that we're masquerading as love, when actually what we're trying to do is, like I said before, fulfill this special mission, which is actually just all about the self still.
Yeah.
It's about you being the hero of the story, you being adored by everyone, getting the validation. And then when you check in with your intentions, it's like, oh shit, like I'm not actually in a place of love. You have to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Love is very hard feeling to embody because of all of this density and programming that we're carrying. It's so easy to just get triggered by other people. So stepping into love, it's not something we can automatically turn on necessarily. You can do, you can get glimpses of it. Again, I would say it's a process of unlocking that energy and allowing it to move into the heart. So it's coming from a more integrated and stable place of love rather than a conditional place of love that comes in fleeting moments. But we do get those fleeting moments of love when we see someone suffering and we want to help them, or we're around nature or animals and we just feel that raw. So there are ways to nurture that loving connection by putting ourselves in the kind of environments that stimulate that feeling. So actually, no, I would say you can actually invite that energy, and I probably need to work on that more myself, rather than always coming from the perspective of, or do the shadow work first. You know, that can sometimes be a cop out. Sometimes we do just need to step into that frequency of love more and stop stop feeling like it's so hard to feel that. I mean, all we need to do, like I said, is just engage the mindful witness and truly be able to understand why people are the way they are. That's true empathy, which is the gateway to love. And the more we can nurture that and practice it before the projections and triggers creep in and we start acting them out, then we will be able to embody more of that love. So really, it's a case of catching our emotional energy in its tracks and not identifying with it, but letting it just run its course and letting it dissolve. And then we can step into that neutral place rather than, oh God, I'm feeling angry and rageful, attaching to that. And then you become the anger and then it needs to spill outward. And then you're just feeding the whole problem again.
Yeah, there's so much there that I could sort of resonate with in a powerful message. But just backtracking, a couple of things I wanted to mention and pick up on is when you said, you know, different feelings that can come upon us, and this feeling of almost being overwhelmed sometimes. And what I've found really works for me, and I've been talking about it with Stephen a lot, is if something doesn't feel right or we're feeling overwhelmed, it's just, we can always just stop what we're doing for that moment and breathe and go, like, what am I actually feeling? And that sort of can assist in discerning whether there are feelings or they're external or something's coming up, and just take time to breathe.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to mention there about when we mention something I've talked about with so many people lately is whether you call it spiritual, loving, compassion, because we're trying to be all these things doesn't mean we have to be a walkover or completely passive. I find the times we're living in is about holding that space sometimes, and almost holding it like a wall and saying, oh, this is it. You know, this is what I'm holding, and this is the it's this far and no further. We're stopping it here, and that doesn't make you uncompassionate to do that and to draw those boundaries.
Yeah, love can be fierce in protecting, truth and nature. Sometimes it has to be when called. We have to uphold healthy boundaries. So again, love isn't just this fluffy concept of this emasculating feeling that especially men can get a hard time. There's still this distortion with masculinity that we need to work through as a collective, where I don't know if you guys have picked up on it, but there's this whole idea that the divine masculine. I don't even like using that term because it kind of it encompasses what I'm talking about. But this idea that men have to be these like fierce masculine warriors and return to their masculinity as if that's what defines the authentic masculine. And I think that's just another defense mechanism now that men are feeling pressured to conform to in response to this hyper liberal society where men are being feminized and emasculated. So we're now swinging the pendulum to the other side, thinking, oh no, I need to be this. And that's very equated to the right wing. I don't want to go into politics because we're looking beyond that, but the right wing, because the right wing is very masculine. It's governed humanity for most of this cycle since the empires have been in control. Call it the patriarchy, call it whatever you want. It's got nothing to do with men necessarily. It's just a distortion of masculinity, right? So in response to that, it makes now the tables are turning and we're moving into the dominance of the left wing. This is why we're seeing all of this crazy liberal stuff. So it's the rise of the distorted feminine now, and it's just exchanging one trap for another. But the solution to that isn't to then become this hyper masculine defense warrior. Being a warrior isn't about, I mean, protecting truth and protecting what's sacred is important, but it doesn't just have that kind of like synthetic expression. To me, it just feels off. I think protection now works on a more metaphysical level now. Physical macho warrior mode isn't going to work. We're not Vikings anymore, you know. We're not going off to the trenches or to the battlefield, and it's not about building the biggest muscles. I do think it's important to be a man and have testosterone and be in touch with our biology. That's important. But from a metaphysical standpoint, I think that masculine energy can have the qualities that you mentioned of defense and boundary setting, but can also embody compassion, love, and that is still masculinity as well. So yeah, I don't think we need to try and hide those feelings in fear of being feminized. It's just stupid.
Yeah, I'm so pleased you have made my night speaking about this, because I know me and Stephen, if I could speak for you as well, Stephen, we share this view and we've talked about it a lot, and I completely agree. And we've experienced or had experiences where we need this masculine side to come forward, and what actually we've seen play out is more of a toxic masculine of the Viking that isn't needed, that really hasn't helped us in the past and won't help us much now, I don't believe. You know, that masculine, like we say, it can hold and protect, but it can also be nurturing and loving.
That goes back to the whole masculine feminine energies that we all have, and that shouldn't compromise our biology. Like I said, I like feminine women. I do. I prefer feminine women. I really do. Not because they're submissive or weak or exploitable, just because I like that essence of the femininity, and it does help to balance my masculinity in its own polarized way that comes together. But that doesn't mean that I don't have those aspects of the feminine within me.
Yeah.
In order to meet a partner, for example, that matches you, you need to have integrated those components first. And then you can meet a partner who's also balanced her masculine, for example, and she can then be in her feminine and you can be in your masculine, but you both still contain the metaphysical aspects of the other, so that there's no triggers or idealizing or projections, whether they're positive or negative. You know, the whole Disney princess stuff and all this crap. You know, just like we said with the masculine, should be in touch with the emotional qualities, because we all have a body, we all have a pain body, we all have emotions and intuition, because we're all spiritual beings in a human avatar. So it doesn't matter whether you're a man or woman. The feminine aspect of being, which is being present and in touch with your emotions and aligned with your intuition, is something all of us should strive for. And likewise, women shouldn't just embody those aspects at the expense of their masculine, because the masculine act of taking discipline and utilizing the mind to create reality, all of those linear kind of aspects, is nice and desirable to see in women. And I think we're evolving as a collective where both genders are able to integrate those aspects. It only becomes a problem when the inversion tactics come into play and they use that to fuel this transhuman, transgender ideology, where men need to become pacified, weak, soy boy kind of thing, and then women are just becoming really aggressive. And well, we know about the toxic feminine, like feminism and all this stuff. It's all been subverted. It's not to say that the intentions aren't in the right place, but when we haven't resolved our trauma, we can easily be hijacked to fight for the wrong cause that's actually feeding this centralization, this singularity, which leads to transhumanism. And it's a mimicry of the organic connection that would be attained if we focus on that process internally, rather than allowing our biology to be manipulated. So yeah, again, it comes back to working with those energies internally first, and then we'll connect to each other properly without falling into this hive mind, which is where they're trying to steer humanity right now.
And what's really interesting there, I just want to make a point, you know, very simply, you know, if people can accept that we are a spirit first in a physical body, that we've chosen this physical body, we've made this choice, and really it's all about remembering. So again, that blaming people about who they are, and really, you know, everything, it hasn't happened by accident. We've chosen this avatar, we've chosen this physical body for a purpose, for a reason. It's all about remembering, accepting, and surrendering that, you know, the universe has not punished us about who we are, if you're gay, straight, bisexual, trans. And does seem to be a lot of very toxic manipulation, and also that sense of victim, you know, blame. Everyone's blaming about who they are, this victim, and lack of personal responsibility. And if I think people can accept more of a spiritual perspective, I think there might be a lot of more inner peace and acceptance about who they are, rather than blaming everybody else, if that sort of made sense.
Yeah, I mean, striving for this unified morality isn't really going to happen. It's about acceptance, whether, like you said, you're gay, straight, whatever, it doesn't matter. But we do need to be cognizant that we're not being distorted. So when people speak out about, you know, transgender, it's not that they're speaking out against the people, it's about the ideology that's being instilled into young people. You know, we're talking like 8-year-olds being taught that it's okay to identify with the other gender. I think you know, that's not very responsible to instill that confusion, because that kid could grow up and then make a big mistake and live to regret it. And that's happening. So these gender reversal distortions can have a really awful effect on the energy body, because it stops that harmonization of the true masculine feminine, which allows us to evolve. So it actually completely disrupts our DNA and our frequency. And that's the intention of the controllers. But in terms of accepting people's sexual orientation as part of their learning experiences, because like you said, we've all incarnated into these bodies for a reason, with certain contracts to fulfill and lessons to learn. And it may be that a man is born into a more feminine feeling or feminine body, and that's okay. I know people who do feel that way in both directions, men and women. And in a way, I feel like I've always been quite attuned to my feminine aspect. I may not have always acted it, but that would have been more of my ego defense mechanism, trying to be accepted by portraying this masculine persona. But actually, if I strip away all of that and I just focus on myself, I feel like I have always been quite in tune with what would be classed as feminine attributes. And there's no shame in being able to say that, because I needed those attributes to be able to fulfill what I'm doing now, rather than getting led astray into this hyper masculine expression. That's why I can see this subversion back into this right wing defense mode, where men are almost purposefully attaching to this masculine persona because they're still avoiding that part of themselves, and they're still seeing it as a weakness. And they're using the convenient scapegoat of what the agenda are doing with the feminization of men as a cop-out to avoid their own synthesis of the feminine, because they still embody that archetype of the distorted masculine. And again, that's okay, because we're learning and we're moving as a collective. And I still think this is one layer better than it was before with the patriarchy, whatever you want to call it. I think that masculine expression of being the warrior and defending families and defending constitutional rights and all of that we're seeing in the political domain at the moment, because that's where the collective is at. I think that's good ultimately in terms of the progression, but eventually we're going to have to move beyond that and understand the dynamics of energy properly, and to understand that we have split into the masculine feminine bodies in order to integrate again and realize on a spiritual level we are inseparable as spiritual beings.
I always feel that perhaps in the very future, when we do live in the golden era, I don't know when that will be. I always try to manifest that all the time, every night. That I feel that in the very foreseeable future, maybe that sense of being man, female, I think there will always be the feminine and the masculine side, because of procreation. We've got to have, humans have to have children, the continuation of the human race. But I think when we fall into more of a union of unconditional love, I don't feel that in future it will matter if you are in love with a man or woman or both, because it will just be pure unconditional love. So I'm hoping once those distortions, those fragmentations are healed, we can work towards, it doesn't matter who you love, and where there would be more of a union of the male and the female side, I feel, and moving away from the distorted sexual side that is very much weaved into that distortion as well, because everything's very sexualized now. And
yeah, exactly. The new earth, whatever you want to call it, it's a creative expression that can take many different forms, and the ultimate premise behind it is that we all treat each other with respect and acceptance as long as we're not harming anyone. I mean, again, that's such a simple principle, and I couldn't care less if someone wanted to hook up with a man or a woman wanted to. It doesn't matter. It's the love that behind it that counts. But again, like you said, we do need to focus on clearing the distortions first. But I'm not of the mindset to be involved in whatever's going on with all this. I think it's way too complex and multifaceted for me to give my energy to. We can talk about it here, but I'm very uninvolved with all of that stuff now. I feel like it's the ultimate form of shadow projection, because we're all so fragmented in our masculine feminine, are largely to do with childhood conflicts, abandonment wounds, and issues with the mother father. That plays a huge role, as well as where we are on a soul level. And I do work with people one-on-one to heal those fragments, but even then, sometimes I'm getting to a point now where I feel like we have to work that out in our own way. I can help facilitate that for people for sure, because I can see it quite clearly through experience, but we have to, when it comes to sexual energy and sexuality, it is so complex. And there's all these judgments, like you said, are going on at the moment. And it just feels so convenient that we're caught up in this conflict with one another, and we're actually not focusing on the right principle. It's, oh, you're transgender, you're this, or you aborted your baby, you're a bad person, or blah blah blah. Like, it's just you know, if we were going to play that game, it would just never end, honestly. Everyone needs to just take responsibility for themselves and stop assuming to be the judge of others. Like, honestly, like, if you wanted to pick out the flaws in every single person on social media, you would just be going till death, honestly, because you're never going to run out of things to complain about. So just focus on yourself. If you've even, like, the art of forgiveness and evolution, it's a very personal process. Only you and God can answer that, right? When I say God, you know what context I mean there.
Yes,
absolutely. But it's our last guest, Jill Harrison, we had on this podcast, put it nicely in the sense of, if we're on our path like lanes on the motorway, that if we were focusing on somebody else's lane and where they're driving, we're not focusing on our own.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll just get derailed into an accident. That's because we're moving. Imagine those highway lanes or whatever, they're like timelines. If you're steering your vehicle, your wheel, and then you're looking at what someone else is doing. Yeah, exactly. That's a great analogy. I like that. Yeah, you're going to just be steered off your core flow. But if you focus on your core flow, then it's back to this whole, we've got to stop fighting the reflection and the mirror, because there's so many people on this planet. What are we trying to do? We're trying to change the whole global society. It's never going to happen. But if we sort ourselves out and interface with those that we actually feel connected to, that's how we birth these new Earth timelines. And you couldn't care less what anyone else is doing once you're in that lane, because who gives a shit? It's like, I mean, it'd be nice if everyone was to see things in that way and strive for the kind of reality that we want. But let's just be honest, it's not going to happen. Some people are just way too entrenched in trauma and drama and technology and all of these pitfalls. And I just accept now that that's what their soul needs to go through. And maybe 3D Earth is just that place, like I said, that it's like the learning field where each soul has the opportunity to finally individuate again. And that doesn't mean then that, you know, we're just running away and focusing on ourselves at the expense of the collective. It just, remember, we're trying to decentralize power here. We're not trying to create a unified reality. That's the New World Order talk, that is. Thinking that everyone should subscribe to your version of reality, even if you feel it's right, doesn't work, because those people, not everyone's at our level. So why don't we work with the people who are at our level, or people who are just a little bit, need that little leg up?
I agree.
And help elevate them, and then focus on actually creating the new together in decentralized micro communities built on resonance. Because if we try and create a global community, it's never going to work. And this is a big pill to swallow, a bitter pill to swallow for some people, because it really hits their hero savior complex. They're like, oh my God, like, what are you saying? Like, the collective is fucked. Well, in a way, we don't know, but just the internet has been designed purposefully in a way to get us all plugged into what's going on in the global world. So we can, at the click of a button, tune into what's going on in the States, and that's good, because I've built some good connections, and maybe they are soul connections that I'm finding across the quantum field. And I'm hoping maybe we'll all come together one day in the physical space, because ultimately we want to meet each other in the real world so we can co-create properly. But as long as we're still interfacing with the medium of technology on these centralized platforms like Facebook and all these social media platforms, we're plugging into the hive mind, which is just an absolute amalgamation of messiness and people's garbage that they're just dumping into that space. And you'll always find a problem if you keep tuning in there. and you'll run your energy to the ground, honestly. And I've done it before. That's why I'm saying it from experience.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's very relevant, definitely. But I just wanted to talk about a couple of things. I found that so interesting, what we just spoke about, and very relevant when we talk about, we've gone from the masculine, the feminine, into sexuality. And what I find is, and I'm going to borrow Stephen's word here that he uses a lot, I'm going to be very controversial here and bring up a subject that I feel sneaking in, that I haven't liked for quite a few months, is this thing of not being able to have an open discussion about anything anymore, where we have to be, you can't say that, and you should say this, and this kind of, we can call it many things, cancelling, or this woke, and what are your sort of feelings on that? My feelings personally are, you can actually have these discussions and say what you like, whether how people react to that is down to them, but you can have these opinions freely. But it feels like there's something pushing down on us that started very slowly last year, of just trying to censor people from having individual opinions, but simply having an exchange. I mean, we're having an exchange right now, and we're learning from one another. And I feel that's so important on our journey.
Yeah, I don't think we need to worry too much about that, actually, because it links back to the resonance thing. If you're speaking authentically, not from a place of projections, you will be restructuring your energy field to reflect that, and the people that come into that space will tend to be quite aligned with that authentic expression. And I found over the years, when I first started speaking my truth, I would very much have been concerned about censorship and stuff, because I was sharing all these links and really getting into like the grittiness of all the YouTube videos, and I was all that stuff. And I do think it's a problem, of course, censorship, and it's definitely getting worse, and it'll continue to. But again, it comes down to trusting ourselves. I think as long as we're truly expressing ourselves authentically, I think the rest will just take care of itself. I'm not trying to preempt something, like, who knows, maybe my Facebook could be just destroyed tomorrow or something. But even if that happened, I would find the lesson in it, and I'd be like, do you know what? Fuck it. Maybe I'm not supposed to have that anymore. So I always try and take the perspective of that there's a meaning behind everything that's teaching me something. So I hope that answers your question. Again, it depends what lens you're looking at it. That's what I would say. If you're a doctor and you're speaking out against COVID or something like that, then of course censorship's a big deal, and I'm all for free speech, and I think it should be defended. But then it gets that point again, it's like, at what point does defending these things become resistance and fighting again?
True.
Do you know what I mean?
Endless cycle. That's all it is. It's an illusion.
With so many things we've discussed tonight, I feel it's balance. Everything has to have balance. Too much of one or the other, that's where it all goes off the cliff, basically.
I think, Chris, what it comes down to, if people spoke with loving kindness and true intention, people shouldn't worry about what they say or don't say, because it comes from the heart. And if you speak from the heart with loving kindness and a deep moral compass, and if you are in your own truth, like Sami said, it doesn't matter what they think. You're in your truth, aren't you?
Yeah, well, the energy that you put into the words that you write contains a frequency. Like, people think they're just reading words, but for me to have structured the words in that way, it actually carries a signature within it. So, like, if I'm really tuned into the creative channel or the divine channel, I might write something so effortlessly that I couldn't give a flying fuck how it's received, because I know that I was tuned in. So even if that resulted in my Facebook being deleted, I'd be like, well, I know that I was supposed to write that because it came so organically. But if I'm writing from a triggered place, say if I'm just really pissed off about the agenda one day, so I go off on some rant about COVID or whatever, and then I'm projecting all this anger and resentment in, then I feel like that then attracts energies that match that, and you're more likely to then run into problems with censorship, because you're then participating in the game again. So
Yes.
yeah, what you said, Chris, about the balance does apply, as long as I wouldn't say the balance is balancing, sometimes doing that and sometimes not. I genuinely just think we should always speak authentically. But yeah, go on.
Something we were very aware of at the beginning of the COVID situation, myself and Stephen, when we started these interviews, we were aware that it was so easy to go down that rabbit hole and get riled up, and then other people would get riled up and, well, oh, and what's happening? Where we fairly quickly came to this realization when we did these talks, instead of going too far in, look, we know that's happening, we know what it is. What can we do? What can we be doing within ourselves to to move forward and to work through this? And I feel
like, it's still important to raise awareness about what's going on. I actually quite blunt about certain pretty deep and dark stuff. So it's not like I'm trying to like stay away from the drama. It's just, again, it comes down to what I said about the frequency of the words. It's kind of like you said, Stephen, it has more love or positive intention imbued into it. So even though I'm talking about something that's really dark, I'm still coming at it from a more emotionally balanced place. Whereas if I was writing the exact same words but from a triggered place, that I guarantee you that would have a different outcome, because words are energy. Everything carries a signature that will reverberate in people's consciousness, even unconsciously. Most people don't even know what they're picking up on, but the resonance is there. It's all contained in like the morphogenetic field, the Akashic records, whatever.
You pick that up in text messages, you pick that up in messages. I can feel their intention, and I thought, oh, I don't like that, I'm sending that back. You know, so as soon as you can tune into that,
you get that uneasy feeling when someone's worded something and it seems to be worded okay, but you're getting this feeling like, no, there's some underlying ulterior motive or trigger in that message, and I'm not feeling it. Like, and anyone with strong discernment who's cleared their energy field or refined it, clearing's not always the best word, will know how to detect those subtle cues within messages and to be able to see the underlying intention that was put into it rather than taking it on face value. It's the same thing with discernment about people in the truth community or whatever. Like, after a while you just get to a point where it almost doesn't matter what they're saying. You can just look into that person and you know whether they're authentic or not, and they might not have all the answers, but for me, authenticity is far more important than being right. Because being right is a process of refining that takes time, and everyone's on their journey. What I look for is this person coming from good intentions? For example, I'll pick up some of that hyper masculine energy I was talking to you about with certain public figures, but I don't feel badly towards them because I can see that they really are, their heart's in the right place. Right. So like that counts for more, because normally if someone's heart's in the right place, they'll eventually get to the truth in the end. If they're committed to their personal process and committed to serving others and serving truth, then you'll find that they'll naturally evolve to the next layer. It's when people get trapped in their trauma and become so resentful, and even those people, they might be saying all the right things, like, oh, we got to take down the cabal, blah blah blah, but there's just this sense of like hostility that they're projecting. They feel quite unsafe to be around sometimes. So for me, it's not black and white. It's not, oh, you're awake and you're a sleeper, so I'm more gravitating to this person. It's way more. We have to consider the intention, and because some people who are just hopelessly brainwashed and naive are some of the loveliest, kind souls, young souls that need nurturing and protecting. I always think of the Harry Potter films for some reason when I think of this analogy, because you got Harry who's like trying to take down the dark forces. Then you got all these Hufflepuff heads who don't have a blind clue what's going on, but they're still like just going about their business in Hogwarts, going to their lessons, and then they all turn on Harry in one of the one of the movies because they think he's like doing something, and then in the end they realize like, oh my god, this guy's actually working. So again, it's that kind of hero's journey narrative we spoke about earlier playing out in that film. That's why I like some of these stories, and those people in that film, those films represent that innocence that we need to protect. So we have to remove biases based on someone's level of awareness and look at the actual embodiment of love that they carry. It's a good reminder,
Sami,
that,
I think have you actually written any books, Sami?
Have I written a book?
Yeah, have you written any books?
I've got a lot of material, but actually I'm not sure whether I'm going to put it in a book for now. I'm actually going to create more of a kind of encyclopedia on my website. So I'm even working on that now. I'm adding more and more to that, and it's going to just continuously evolve into a larger body of work. And for now, I think that might be a better way of getting the information out there than through a book. But I would like to create a book. Actually, I'm thinking of getting a prototype made because I've already written a book. But it's just all the all the admin around it that I just find a bit laborious, because I don't like to follow specific structures like, oh, you got to do, all the stuff you have to put in books. Like for me, I just want them to open the book and then chapter 1 and then chapter 10. Don't read all this forward stuff and you know what I mean? But to be fair, you can make a book with that and there's no rules. So I might just do it as a simple thing, but I would like it to have a nice, like design and cover. So I am thinking about that, definitely. It's been in the works for ages.
Yeah, amazing. I'll be the first to buy it. Yeah, I can just read you stuff all the time.
No, it would be nice because it's more of a physical hard copy as well. It feels a bit more tangible and less technological. So it will happen. It will happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're interested in reading any of Sami's work or the other work that he does, you can check out his website, shiftingtimeline.com. And some of his posts are really good, insightful, and all of that individuality and authenticity as well. Very much so. That's how I know I find them. So I feel like we've had quite a fairly deep dive here in this conversation. It's taken instead of going gradually, it's gone sharp right turn, sharp
right turn. It all ties together though, really. There's always a common thread, and I think we've picked up a few key themes today. One of the main ones being not to fight this battle with resistance, and that doesn't mean that you're avoiding responsibility or duty to serve others. In fact, the best duty you can provide to others is to serve yourself first, and then from that place of balance then come with a better well-intended energy, like we said, heart-based intention. Put that into whatever outlet that works best for us, and then attract people that resonate with that, and then build outwards from there, and then witness the shifting of the timelines happening organically rather than from a place of unresolved trauma, resistance, fighting, and all these outdated modes that are obsolete now.
Yeah, you almost feel that when you see things playing out and you're like, oh, not this again. We don't really need to do that. Can we try another way?
We have to. We really do.
There are other ways to do this. We've had it shown so many times that it doesn't work and how it comes out, and you can see, and you can recognize the signs. That's why it's not some psychic link. It's just so that obvious.
Yeah,
it's what we're seeing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just wanted to ask you one more thing because I've had a great chat tonight. Is about what do you feel the role of our ancestors in all this work at the moment in time? Have they, in terms of supporting this journey that we're on as on the Earth plane in this time of change?
Well, we're a product of our ancestors genetically. We carry their coding within our DNA. So it's our job as individuating souls to transmute the trauma along that bloodline, that ancestral line, once and for all. We need to be the ones to break the cycle so we don't keep recycling the trauma through the generational line. Because at the moment, we're still recycling to our kids because we're still traumatized. We keep having more children, filtering it onto them. Eventually someone has to come along and break it. So that's the way I view it ancestrally. We're doing the ancestral work simultaneously to doing the soul evolution work. So they work very much hand in hand.
Yeah, again, I totally agree. And I'm finding at our centre that a lot of people are stepping forward and sharing, and you can see them almost, the strength within them, that they're very determined to to come out of these loops,
break the cycle.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you can see they're going to do it, because they're, in a way, that they're owning it. They're not hiding from it and saying, you know, I've had this perfect existence. No, I haven't. Here's my shadow. Here's what I've faced. Here it is, all to see. And that, to me, is strength. That's great strength, to be able to just say, here it is.
Exactly. It doesn't matter what you've been through or how much shit you've accumulated, even just in this lifetime. If you become conscious of your darkness and you intend to serve truth and the divine, you'll always be offered grace by the divine, because the divine is forgiving, it's loving, and it wants us to reconnect with it. It's not a punishing force that wants to condemn us for our sins or all this religious programming. So we do have to find strength to face the truth of the ways we've acted or been in darkness, whether it's the victim or the victimizer expression of that, and finally decide to step bravely into that and to transmute it. And when we do that and we fully align with God's source, we'll be divinely guided, and we won't be fulfilling all these external timelines anymore.
Yeah, here to that 100%. So just thank you so much, Sami, for giving your time and sharing
No
with
problem.
us again. Absolutely love to do it again,
Of course.
sooner rather than later.
Yeah,
Because
for sure.
I just always feel there's more. There's always more.
There is, the never ends.
But for this time, I just feel there's so much we've covered, and it's been wonderful. And I hope all our listeners, that you've been able to resonate and take something from this talk, because this is what it's about. This is why we do these talks, to speak with people, you know, like-minded souls from across the world, who have perhaps different interpretations and ways of sharing things, in hopes that it'll resonate with people individually, and it's an exchange, a wonderful exchange. Yeah, so thank you very much to everybody who's listened. Thank you to Sami for being our guest.
Thank you,
Always
guys.
so insightful. And as we said, we'll be posting links wherever you're listening to this, whether on YouTube, Spotify. There will be links below if you want to connect further into Sami's work as well, or the work we do at the Purple Mountain. So till next time we join you, we just send lots of our love to each and every person, and we look forward to speaking to you again.
Take care, guys. Speak soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.